Hello, heathens, and welcome to Spinning the Wheel podcast with me, your host, Megan Angus. This week, we are going to be taking a close look at Mabon season, waning half moon in Cancer, lunar week 32 by some lunar calendars. Let's get into it. Okay, we are in Mabon season. It's cold out, and I'm really excited. Yay, fall is here. The dark half is here. La 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 la. Screw you, summertime fans. Okay, I'm sorry, but yeah, no, I'm stoked. I'm glad the leaves are falling. The good clothes get to come out of the closet. We get to wear our cool jackets. I'm excited. I love this half of the year. I am born in December, so I am by default kind of a wintertime or late fall baby, as it is anyways. But I've also grown up in a lot of places that were really hot, and so just the idea of having seasons is very exciting to me, and the fact that some of those seasons are legitimately cold is wonderful. I know some people out there really hate the cold. Tough. Too bad. Sorry. Go take a hot bath. Okay. To ground us in our work for this week, let's talk about the witches' work and our global themes. I kind of like doing this at the beginning of all of our podcasts now. Who knows if I'll keep doing it? Again, this is a bit of an experiment. We're still, figuring out what this thing is and the shape it's going to take. But okay. Mabon season witches' work. We are working with archetypal imagery like the harvest. We are working on our health, right? This is a time for intense labor and then rest and recuperation after that intense labor. So purification and atonement come into that conversation as well, and transitioning from our summertime life into our fall and wintertime life. And for global themes, it's all about abundance, healing. We're still doing a little bit of ocean worship, and we're definitely doing some ancestor worship, and that is going to come up to an extent this week. Okay, so let's get into what we got going on. All right, September 28th, this lunar week starts with a waning half moon in Cancer at 6 degrees, and it is exact at 6:57 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day for everyone else on the planet. And before we get into everything else that's going on this week, I just want to remind you that we have Mercury Retrograde kind of floating around in the background of everything else that we're doing. So we want to be keeping in mind that communication between people, information, data, all that stuff might be a little skewed this week. Like a person might be talking, but we might not be hearing what they're actually saying. Or we might be trying to express something and the person across from us is not picking up what we're trying to put down. We might send an email or send a text message and it just doesn't go through for some random reason. And then that creates a level of confusion or frustration or weirdness between us and others. So as we're doing our work this week, we want to just try to remember that in the background, we've got Mercury acting a little squirrely. And if you are subscribed to my Patreon, I threw up a video for all the patrons with just a little heads up on the kind of spell work and witches work and magical work that we can do with a Mercury retrograde in fall, in Mabon season, and in Libra in particular, the sign that Mercury is retrograding in or through, as it were, and some brief descriptions of, the houses. So if it's transiting through your 5th house or your 7th house or your 10th house, there's a brief description there for everybody. All right, let's get on with it. So we've got this waning half moon in Cancer, and this is a vibe that is going to kind of carry through the whole week. This waning half moon in Cancer in particular is really asking us to step into healing, but healing through grieving, healing through letting go of some stuff, healing through allowing ourselves to feel our sadness and to process that and allow it to move through. We did some of this work last month as well. And, hey, it's it's 2021. We might be doing this work all throughout the entire year, right? So if this is a process that you need to engage in, this moon really supports this work. If you have been engaging in this process and allowing yourself to feel your sorrow and your frustration and your disappointment around the way that things are in the world right now, very, very valid. Good for you. Good job that you've been sitting with yourself and allowing yourself to say, hey, this really sucks. And I'm going to allow myself to acknowledge to myself how much this sucks. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. So if you need to do some of that work, this is a great week for it. If you've been doing that work, this might also be a week for you to attend to others who are grieving. If you have the emotional and the psychological space, you've cried your cry, you can go, get some takeout dinner for a friend who needs to have their moment of sorrow and feel their sadness and get back in touch with that stuff. This is also a really fantastic week for attending to those souls who have passed and who have not been properly mourned. And we have a few holy days this week dedicated to deities of death and transition. So we have assistance from the gods for doing that work. Okay. I will also say that anytime the moon is in Cancer, no matter what phase it is in, it is an excellent moon for doing magic and spellcasting of all types. And our magic and our spellcasting is very supported by a moon in Cancer. Okay. Our lunar body work that we are doing with this waning half moon in Cancer, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring and resting our chests, our breasts, our lungs, and our belly. And for our plant body work that we want to be doing, we want to plant or transplant any plants, especially for supporting below ground results. So for supporting root health in the plants. All right, now let's get into the holy days of September 28th. Okay, our holy days for September 28th. From September 28th to September 29th, we have Simchas Torah from our Jewish friends. This is a smaller holiday within the Jewish religion that celebrates the Torah and the religious or the devotional reading of the Torah. There's a whole cycle that runs throughout the entire year, and this is the beginning of the new cycle. It comes right after the Jewish New Year. Also here on September 28th, we have the birth of Confucius. Kind of a big deal, right? That guy or person. This is from Taoism and our Chinese friends. Confucius was a Chinese philosopher and politician who was traditionally considered the paragon of Chinese sages. Confucius is widely considered one of the most important and influential individuals in human history. Straight up. Confucius's teachings and philosophy formed the basis of East Asian culture and society and continues to remain influential across China and East Asia today. Literally billions of people practice Confucianism and study Taoism. Also on this day, we have the Dies Natalis for the Temple of Apollo and Latona from our Roman ancestors. As we've talked about in other podcasts, Dies Natalis literally means the day of birth. And so this is a day for the birthday of the physical temple of the deity. So it could have been the day that the first stone was laid or the last stone was laid and the temple was actually dedicated. The birthday moment kind of shifts depending on who's doing it. But we know who Apollo is, right? This is a god of the sun. We have a lot of festivals from the Romans dedicated to Apollo. it was kind of a big deal. The sun, sort of a big deal. But the other deity that's being talked about here is Latona. And Latona is a goddess that has an unclear origin. We don't know exactly who she is or what she was doing. So there are several explanations for the origin of the goddess and the meaning of her name. Older sources speculate that the name is related to Letha, or the lotus, meaning the fruit that brings oblivion to those who eat it, or oblivion, Letha, like the river Letha. So this name could mean the hidden one. And that absolutely connects us to our hermit Virgo imagery that we have been working with so much at this time of year. But other sources attribute the name Latona to Leto, and that it is derived from the Lycian word Lada, which means wife. And of course, we see a goddess in Slavic culture named Lada, who is the wife of Yarilo. So perhaps the name connection is there. And what's interesting is, of course, Leto is the daughter of the Titans, Coeus and Phoebe, and the sister of Asteria, and she is the mother of Apollo and Artemis. So it would make sense potentially that this is actually the connection, because this is a day dedicated to the temple, potentially dedicated to both of these people. What I think is really interesting here is, if you don't know the myth of Leto, she was tricked by Zeus into fathering Apollo and Artemis. And Hera, of course, cast in the role of the bitchy wife, shunned her, and in her jealousy said to all of the land masses of the world, she's not allowed to conceive anywhere. Turns out Leto was pregnant, of course, with these two twins, right? So she can't conceive anywhere, not allowed to step on land and conceive. And eventually she found an island that was not attached to the ocean floor. Therefore, it was not considered land, and she could give birth. Once Apollo and Artemis were grown, Leto withdraws to remain a dim and benevolent matronly figure upon Olympus. And I think that that's all very interesting stuff. We have our ocean goddess, ocean worship stuff happening in the background at this time of year. And that she is the hidden one, and she is a mother goddess. Of course, we have mother imagery happening at this time of year as well. So a lot of really interesting things there with this Latona character. Okay, that is everything for September 28th. All right, September 29th, the moon is still in Cancer. So we are still doing that waning half moon in Cancer work. Also on this day, we have Venus in Scorpio trine Neptune retrograde in Pisces at 21 degrees. So we also, I want to make a note before I talk about the astrology of this. We also have the Sun in Libra trine Saturn retrograde in Aquarius at 6 degrees. And these two signatures create a very interesting environment for us to possibly work in or possibly not work in. So Venus trine Neptune generally indicates a transit that is a very sweet day, full of daydreaming, full of fantasy, full of lollygagging around, and like really just sort of floating about and enjoying life. It's not a super great day for trying to get hard work done. That takes a lot of effort and focus, but it is a really great day for being compassionate, for being empathetic. But we can also be susceptible to a little illusion or delusion. So we may, become friends with someone on a day like this and think, oh my gosh, have I found my soulmate? And then, later, no, I have not. But why I want to mention these together is because the Sun trine Saturn is a fantastic day for getting work done. So it could be that early in the day, you feel very dreamy and very lazy and very like, I just need to loll around the house and sort of like drift in my fantasy. And then halfway through the day, you're like, bam, we're going to kick it into overdrive. Let's get it done. And even if you're not trying to actually get things done, Sun in Libra, trine Saturn in Aquarius is a great day to examine your life and what you have built. even if you're not trying to actually get real work done on this day, it can be a great day for review. And again, we have our Mercury retrograde floating around in the background. So that Mercury retrograde absolutely supports the illusion delusion part of that Venus trine Neptune thing, making things maybe a little more foggy than they already would be. And that Mercury in retrograde also really supports taking a moment to review and reorganize and reconsider our life goals and what we have been able to build so far and how do we feel about all of that and all of that stuff. Okay, that's everything for the moon and the astrology. Let's get into the holy days of September 29th. All right, our holy days for September 29th kick off with Michaelmas from our Catholic friends. Michaelmas is also known as the Feast of Saints, and this is a day that celebrates the Archangel Michael or Michael. And this is a day that actually has a lot of connection to Mabon and to Lunar. Even though it happens after Mabon, this is a holiday that a lot of pagan-y Christians and Christian-y pagans like to celebrate as their big harvest, end of summer, beginning of fall type festival. And so all of the symbolism of these three holidays will kind of get wrapped up in each other. If we look throughout pagan Christian Europe, we will see a lot of harvest festival symbolism woven into their Michaelmas celebrations. So, other facts and tips and tricks about this. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm kind of weirded out today. Sorry. So on Michaelmas, this day used to be just dedicated to the Archangel Michael or Michael. But throughout time, the Catholic Church has changed what days the angels and the saints and other fancy people are venerated on. And so at one point, and I do point this out throughout the year, all of the archangels had their own separate days that they were celebrated or venerated on. But at some point, the Catholic Church was like, nope, let's just lump them all together and put it on one day. So that day became Michaelmas, or Michaelmas, I should say, was picked for the day that all of the other angels were sort of moved to. Hence why it is also known as the Feast of Saints. Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael are the angels that are generally venerated on this day. And note, that's only 3, right? But there are 4 archangels that are worked with in magical systems like Gnosticism, Hermeticism, etc. And Uriel is the other angel. Some Catholic sources will name Uriel, some will not. Michaelmas has been one of the 4 quarter days of the financial, judicial, and academic year within the church. And these 4 archangels are connected to the 4 fixed signs in astrology. They're connected to the 4 elements, the 4 directions. So they very much carry that quadra vibe for magical practices. In Christian angelology, the Archangel Michael is the greatest of all the angels, hence why everybody's feast days were moved to his day or its day, their day. And Michael is honored for defeating Lucifer in the War of Heaven. Yes, I'm sure he is. We know, of course, Satan is shorthand for the goddess, right? Lucifer is shorthand for light-bearing deities that disagreed with Yahweh, basically. And so what I ask you to do is to go back and consider some of the imagery that we focused on during Virgo season with the hermit and the various hermit tarot cards that are out there showing a hermit holding a great staff. And oftentimes that staff is pointing to or even stabbing a dragon or a serpent dragon or a serpent of some kind. And this is all very much that imagery all being sort of woven together of this wise sage character fighting off the goddess, fighting off this deity family, basically. / For the very initiated, we will note that a lot of those hermit cards, the staff is not wounding the dragon or the serpent, it is pointing directly to it. So there is also, very similar to when you are working with Catholic or Christian imagery, on the surface of it, you think you're seeing one thing, but for those with eyes to see, right, we begin to learn what the symbolism means, and we actually see a completely different story in the picture. So, Michaelmas, the 29th of September. Also on this day, we have the Feast of Elegua from our Yoruba friends. Elegua is an incredibly powerful Orisha and a deity of roads in the religion of Santeria, Umbanda, Kimbanda, and Candomblé. He is syncretized with St. Michael. Convenient. And this Orisha is the owner of caminos, or roads and paths. All ceremonies and rituals in Santeria must first have the approval of Elegua before progressing. And also on this day, we have the Feast of Papa Legba from our Vodun friends, or Papa Legba is a Guinan in Haitian Vodun, who serves as the intermediary between the Loa and humanity. And we see that really connects us quite a bit. Also our Elegua symbolism. This is all very mercurial, isn't it? Right? Very hermetic and very mercurial. Papa Legba stands at a spiritual crossroads and gives or denies permission to speak with the spirits of the Guinea, and is believed to speak all human languages. Again, very mercurial. In Haiti, he is the great elocutioner. Legba facilitates communication, speech, and understanding. He is commonly associated with dogs, and Papa Legba is invoked at the beginning of every ceremony. So we can see that there is some syncretism between Papa Legba and Elegua. They are two separate entities, but they are very similar and ultimately grow out of the same root of belief system. And so here we have these very powerful, very present deities in syncretism with the Archangel Michael, sort of standing at the crossroads of time and space, and standing at the crossroads between life and death. Again, very hermetic, very mercurial when we think about all the stuff that we know that Mercury and deities like Mercury get involved with. All right, let us move on to September 30th. All right, that brings us to September 30th. And on September 30th, the moon moves into Leo. And so now we are working with the waning half moon in Leo. And during this time, this is a really fantastic time to take a look at what is not working and get super real with ourselves about the plans that are not unfolding the way that we had planned for them to unfold. This is work that we are going to do every month when we come to the waning half moon, just to kind of reorient us in our lunar cycle. We've got our new waxing crescent, waxing half, the gibbous, the full, disseminating, waning half, balsamic, and then back to the new. And so we're really close to the end of the lunar cycle here at the waning half. It comes right after the disseminating moon. And the disseminating moon is where we really kind of see the fullness and the ripeness of our lunar project, or whatever it is that we've been working on for the last month. And so then the waning half comes along and points out like what can be let go of. Even if everything was super successful, there might be some things that we want to just end or let go of, or say that was really cool, but I want to try something different, et cetera, et cetera. With this waning half moon in Leo, we also want to be taking a look at what didn't work. And maybe we feel a lot of pride around those things, but we need to be really honest with ourselves and say, this is not working. This is not turning out the way that I had planned. What can I change? But also what needs to be thrown away? What needs to be let go of? What needs to be completely overhauled before we step into the next lunar cycle in a few days? So that's really the work that we're doing with this waning half moon in Leo. Again, we've got that Mercury retrograde in the background, so we have help to do that work. We have help to go back and look at, let me review and reevaluate and reorganize and all that stuff. With this waning half moon in Leo, for our lunar body work, we are resting, relaxing, supporting, nourishing, or otherwise restoring our heart, our back, and our circulation. I meant to say this earlier. As I say in every episode, I am not a medical doctor of love. Please get with your trusted health advisor if you want to integrate any of my information around lunar cycles and body maintenance. For our plant body work, we are harvesting, we are controlling insects and pests, we are plowing, we are weeding, or we are pruning our plants during this waning half moon in Leo. And for the astrology on this day, we have Venus in Scorpio square Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius at 22 degrees. Okay, Venus square Jupiter is still a fun transit. It's still a goofy transit. It's still a silly transit. It is a fantastic day for goofing off, enjoying life, enjoying your friends, hanging out, having a good time, just enjoying. That's really the best stuff that we can do when we've got a Venus square Jupiter, because Venus square Jupiter can also entice us into overdoing it, overindulging, overspending, overcommitting, overpromising, all that stuff. And we definitely don't want to be doing any of those things during a Mercury retrograde. So Mercury retrograde already encourages us to not necessarily make a super important purchase or super expensive purchase. And this Venus square Jupiter is very much like, oh, I can totally afford this $5,000 mattress for my bed, no problem. And then it turns out that it's actually twice as expensive and the warranty is no good and you know what I mean? We really are encouraged to kind of jump in with both feet without looking. And with the extra astrology in the background, it's not a super great day for it. So goof off, low commitment goofing off. That's my recommendation. All right, let's get into the holy days of September 30th. All right, for September 30th, we actually have a very small portion on our holy days. First off, from September 30th through October 27th, we have the Celtic tree month of Ivy. Ivy is not a tree. It's going to be okay. Let's move on. From the Learn Religions website, ivy often lives on after its host plant has died, a reminder to us that life goes on in the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So very apt to be working with this plant in the month or so leading up to Samhain, right? I don't know if you've ever tried to weed in a garden where ivy has been growing, but you can pull the plant out and pull the plant out and pull the plant out. If there is any little piece left of the plant, it will find a way to reroot itself and come back from the dead, literally. So it is very apt to have this plant venerated at this time of year. The Celts called this month Gort. This is a time to banish the negative from your life, do workings related to improving yourself, and placing a barricade between you and the things that are toxic to you. Definitely something that I recommend for our fall Mercury retrograde work. Ivy can be used in magic performed for healing, protection, cooperation, and to bind lovers together if you do that sort of thing. And I also think that ivy is really apt or appropriate for honoring the dead, for planting around gravestones and things like that, because it does have that resurrection quality to it. Also on this day, we have the Feast of Papa Shango from our Yoruba friends. Now, I have this holiday in my notes, and I want to say I might be wrong. I have it included in the calendar because I haven't necessarily found anything that totally says it's not supposed to be on this day, but I know that Papa Shango also has a holy day very close to summer solstice. So I don't know if I found a calendar at one point that marked this and perhaps that website doesn't exist anymore, or if I'm wrong. Papa Shango does sit somewhat comfortably with Papa Legba and Elegua that we talked about previously. But Shango is a thunder and lightning deity in the Yoruba religion. He is known for his powerful axe. He is considered to be one of the most powerful rulers that Yoruba land has ever produced. And in the New World, he is syncretized with either Saint Barbara or Saint Jerome. And again, those are saints that have holy days at a different time in the year. So I'm putting it here because this has been in my notes for a very long time. But this year, I was not able to find the information that I was looking for to really. So I almost took it out, but I was like, no, I'm going to leave it in, but I'm going to leave it in with the caveat that I might be wrong. It's Mercury retrograde, right? We're reviewing. All right, let's move on to October 1st. All right, this brings us to October 1st. And as far as our moon, we still have our waning half moon in Leo. So we are still doing that Leo work that we need to be doing. In astrology, we have a couple things. One, Mars in Libra oppose Chiron in Aries at 10 degrees. This could be a super chill day for some folks and a super tough day for other folks, especially if you have placements in Libra or Aries. Mars is the ruler of Aries, and so it's opposite its own sign right now. And Chiron does not rule Libra, but Chiron represents, we've talked about this in other podcasts, Chiron represents the sacred wound that is in us, that all of us carry. And Mars represents that thing in us that fights and protects and is defensive and keeps us safe. And so when we have a transit between Mars and Chiron, it can be a spicy day, and it can be a day that we feel defensive about everything that's going on. All of it feels like a personal attack. All of it feels like the criticism is being directed perfectly and exactly at us and nowhere else. And we're supposed to just take it on the chin with a grin and a smile and like, yuck, yuck, this is great. I love being told I'm a piece of crap. Woo-ha, right? It can really feel like that. And that's usually not what's happening. What's actually happening is Chiron is trying to point out to us stuff that we need to work on. And how do we know that? Because we're still really, really sensitive around it. And work on, quote unquote, meaning understanding what this pain could be good for, how we might use it to benefit ourselves, and how we might use it to benefit the people around us. But again, we've got that Mercury retrograde floating around in the background, right? So on this day, this might be a day that we dismantle some of the negative inner talk that we have, like I am always this or I never that. I have to carry this wound, and I'm jaded in these ways, and I'm bitter in these ways. And this Chiron opposition may give us a chance that is still a funky chance. It still hurts. It's still hard work. Let's not fool ourselves on that part. But it gives us an opportunity to go, whoa, wow, I have some pretty spicy inner narratives here. I have some pretty funky self-talk. Would I say these things to a friend? Would I say these things to a child? Would I say these things to a loved one? Then why am I saying them to myself? Why am I insisting that these negative takes are the only takes that are possible in the situation? What's going on internally for me right now? Could be that kind of work. Okay. Also on this day, we have Mercury in retrograde in Libra, square Pluto, also in retrograde, in Capricorn at 24 degrees. We dealt with this Mercury square Pluto thing last week, and we will deal with it again when Mercury stations direct later in October. So this Mercury-Pluto conversation is a point that we get to go over and over and over. Who isn't excited? Me. You? No. Just kidding. But what can this lend us towards? This can lend us behaviors like really obsessive thinking. Like we talked about that last week of this, like, I can't get this song out of my head, or I can't get this thought out of my head. And given the other stuff that's going on, right, that I can't get this thought out of my head might be, I always screw this up, or this will never work out for me, or, I'm always going to fall short in the following ways. Mercury square Pluto can also lend a lot of intensity to communications. So you might be trying to explain something to someone and they are like, why are you going off on me right now? Or somebody is trying to explain something to you and you're like, dude, why are you trying to convince me so hard that this thing is true or false? Like, what is up? So it can be a day where intensity and power are like really deeply woven into everything that we're doing, and it's hard to discern what is just my normal baseline and then what is the thing that I'm all fired up about, that kind of stuff. But also, Mercury square Pluto lends us incredible personal insight. We want that during a Mercury retrograde because that's the work that we're doing, right? What needs to be changed, what needs to be revived, reconnected, or reorganized, or whatever. And it's a really fantastic day for studying profound and intense subject matter. So, a spicy day potentially on October 1st of like having a really tough conversation with yourself about the things that you're feeling a bit obsessive around or compulsive around, and really allowing yourself to have an open dialogue about how did I get here and what am I going to do about that. All right, let's move on to our holy days for October 1st. Holy days for October 1st. We start with the Festival of Drunkenness from our Egyptian ancestors, commemorating the return of the Eye of Ra, which was celebrated on the 20th day of the month of Thout. And we've talked about the month of Thout, that is named after the Hermetic mercurial god Thoth. Go check it out. I think it was 2 episodes ago that we really went off on him. But this celebration is was at the temples to Hathor and other eye goddesses. So other goddesses that were dedicated to or connected to the Eye of Ra. It was celebrated as early as the Middle Kingdom, but it is best known from the Ptolemaic and Roman times. It was filled with dancing and feasting and drinking and having this wonderful time and really sort of letting go into the debaucherousness of it all. And all of this dancing and eating and drinking and feasting that took place during the festival represented the opposite of the sorrow and the hunger and the thirst that the Egyptians associated with death. Whereas the rampages of the Eye of Ra brought death to humans, aka the sun, the Festival of Drunkenness celebrated life, abundance, and joy. And as we know, in the solar cycle of ancient Egyptians, the heart of summer was the end of their year because it was the hottest time, and it was the hardest time to get anything to grow, to stay alive, right? The sun was really thought of as this like beast that, sort of lost control of itself at some point and had to be brought into brought back under control, brought back into sort of rational thinking again. There's a really great story about Sekhmet, so aka Hathor as Sekhmet, which might in fact be connected to the Festival of Drunkenness. That Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess, as the sun, was basically on a rampage and had gotten so hot that she had become bloodthirsty and she was just killing everyone. And at some point, the priests all get together and are like, we gotta do something about this because this lady has gone crazy. Like, what is going on? And they decide to take thousands and thousands and thousands of barrels of beer and dye them red with pomegranate juice and line them up on the horizon so that when Sekhmet rises as the sun to scorch the planet with another blisteringly hot day, she'll see all these barrels of blood and chug them down. And she does. She's excited. She's like, whoa, blood. And she drinks it down. Turns out, again, beer, and passes out. And finally, her reign of hot terror comes to an end. And she wakes back up and she's like, woo. And they were like, please don't do that again. She's like, it'll be at least a year before I go off like that again. Also on this day, we have the feast of St. Teresa from our Catholic friends. St. Teresa of Avila was an incredible historical figure. She was a troublemaker. She was a mystic. She was a visionary, a teacher, and wrote some of the most seminal Catholic works out there. Plenty of people in the church and outside of the church read her work because it was good and it is still good. She wrote a piece called The Interior Castle, which is a guide to spiritual development, and another work called The Way of Perfection, which is about making progress in the contemplative life. Again, very hermetic, right? She had visions. She also had raptures during which she would levitate. And so that she didn't get in trouble and wasn't burned at the stake, her sisters would hold her down. And at some point, some Catholic priest or monk was like, "We got to get this girl out of the streets. This is not going to work." And eventually, she went to a nunnery and became a nun and became dedicated to the Catholic religion and to Jesus. One of my favorite pieces of artwork of all time is the sculpture of St. Teresa of Avila by Bernini. It's a really, really beautiful piece. Okay, the other thing that's happening on this day is in the Byzantine church, we have the Feast of Mary. And as we have talked about many times over the last several episodes, and really throughout the year, we will see holidays from the various Catholics, and they're all on different days, but they're always at the same time of the year. So we've had the Orthodox or Eastern Catholic Feasts of Mary. We've had the regular old Catholic Feasts of Mary, and now we are having the Byzantine Feast of Mary. And yes, Mary very much is connecting to our mother goddess that is giving birth to this massive harvest that is the Mabon celebration and fall equinox. All right, let's move on to October 2nd. Okay, October 2nd, we have our moon moving into the balsamic phase. And so we have our balsamic moon in Leo at 24 degrees at 4:35 p.m. Pacific Standard Time later in the day for just about everybody else on the planet. And this marks the last 50 to 60 hours or so until the new moon. So I talk about this every month, but I'll say it again here. When we move into the balsamic phase, as much as is realistically possible for your life, I highly recommend shutting it down. Take some private time to be alone. If that is an extra long poop with the door locked, cool, great. If that can be a bath or a shower, fantastic. If that can be, several hours by yourself with the phone off and the internet off, fantastic. If that can be an overnight, wonderful. If that can be, a couple of days of you alone camping in the woods, fantastic. Like whatever level you can create that environment for yourself, do it, please. It's really, really good for you. It's really important. And it gives us that opportunity, just like we're talking about with Mercury Retrograde, to slow down, stop, rest, revise, reorient, and then get ready for the next round of action. Okay. So when we have our balsamic moon in Leo, we are coming into a place where we want to be speaking our opinions from our highest self. We talked about this lunar phase last month a little bit. We want to seek out writings of eloquent speakers. We might want to debate on this day, but we want to, one, move from a place of respect, and two, we almost want to emphasize more the performance of debating versus the subject matter. It's really more about the act of speaking eloquently, writing eloquently, presenting eloquent thoughts. And so it really is almost more about the performance of that moment than it is about the subject matter. Okay. We're still doing our lunar work in terms of body work for Leo stuff, our heart, our back, all of that stuff. We're still doing the same plant work, pruning and whatnot. Same. Okay. For astrology, we have on this day Venus in Scorpio, sextile Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto retrograde, I should say, in Capricorn at 24 degrees. Okay, so we've already had some run ins with Pluto this week. So we already know Pluto makes things or encourages intensity in situations, power, intensity in situations. So with Venus sextile Pluto, emotions can run very, very deep with this transit. Our friendships might become much more important. Sex or sexual or sensual contact with ourselves or with others might be very, very intense on this day. And I want you to remember that we've got that Venus-Neptune signature earlier in the week. We've got Mercury retrograde floating around in the background. And so all of this intensity, all of this importance ramping up might really feel like I need to commit to this thing. This thing is super real, and it might not actually be. It might be, but it might not be. So again, I would just advise holding off for a few days before we make any super hardcore commitment style decisions on a day like this. I've found my soulmate. Give it 48 hours. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Also on this day, might as well include this here, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Vindemiatrix. This is a pretty important fixed star. This is in the right arm of the constellation Virgo. And the traditional name for Vindemiatrix comes from the Greek through the Latin word meaning the grape harvestress. And so it literally marks her arm and hand that is holding the grapes. Important symbolism there. Pretty important symbolism. All right, let's get on to, actually, let me mention this also. October 2nd through November 7th, we have the Orionids meteor showers. And the following few days are going to be a really great time to see the showers, but unfortunately the full moon is going to hit right about in the middle or the high point of the Orionids this year. So, oh well. We have other meteor showers coming up though, so there'll be other chances for star catching and star watching. All right, now let's move on to the holy days of October 2nd. All right, on October 2nd, from our friends in Singapore and really throughout Asia, we have the birthday of the deity Sun Wukong. This is the monkey god of healing and easeful death. So here we have, all wrapped up in one, a deity that is focused on healing, which we have plenty of last week, this week, next week, all around, and easeful death. We've already had multiple deities show up this week that have to do with crossroads and death and transformation and transition. So really cool stuff. There's actually too much cool stuff to say about this deity. I highly recommend going and reading up on them. SUN Wukong, Sun Wukong. There is an amazing Wikipedia page on this deity. Really cool stuff. Their myth really reminded me of the divine twins from the Mayan myth cycle. Really cool adventures. But yeah, okay, moving on. We also on this day have the Feast of Guardian Spirits from our pagan friends around the planet. So this is one of those holidays. We've talked about this in other episodes. The Wheel of the Year is a practice that is becoming more and more popular with pagans. And as that happens, people over the last 20 years or so have built calendars and put them up on websites on the internet. And some of those calendars have dates that are verifiable, and some of those calendars have dates that are not verifiable in terms of ancient historical records. Paganism in its modern form is pretty modern. To just say that something is pagan means nothing and all kinds of stuff all at the same time. Is it Irish? Is it Slavic? Is it Greek? What kind of pagan are we talking about? Is it Norse, right? Like there's a lot of kind of pagan out there. So when we talk about the Feast of the Guardian Spirits, we talk about these modern calendars. What I see here is that this is the pagan acknowledgement of those that Archangel holiday that we are having at the beginning of the lunar week. If it's something different, I'm totally open to that piece of information, but that's the closest correlation that I could come up with. Again, with a lot of these modern pagan calendars, they are picking approximate days for some things, and they are inventing days that are meant to be syncretic or correlatives to things that are happening in the Catholic calendar or the Buddhist calendar or the Islamic calendar. And I think that that's fine. I don't see anything wrong with that as long as we're being respectful about how we go about that process. But we also want to acknowledge when something has some sort of historical footing and when it's something that maybe is more from the modern era. Okay. Also on this day, from our Greek ancestors, we have Achelous. These sacrifices were performed in the Attic demos of Erythia in association with the earth goddess Athena and the air or messenger god Hermes. Achelous was the primary river god, but what's weird about that is that this river was actually located in western Greece, quite far from Attica. And Achelous was an anonymous maiden, quote unquote, or unmarried woman. So we have no myth to provide any background or anything else around this observance. But I think that the fact that this was somehow associated with Hermes, and somehow this was associated with an anonymous maiden, aka unmarried woman. This very much connects us back to some kind of Virgo imagery, some kind of, we have on this same day the heliacal rising of the fixed star Vindimatrix, which is in the constellation of Virgo. So maybe I'm just putting stuff together. Maybe there's something there. All right, let us move on to October 3rd. October 3rd, our balsamic moon moves into the sign of Virgo. And I've already said it, I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it even more so next week when we have our new moon. Go be alone to contemplate. This is such a hermetic moon. If you work with a group, you should be alone together, not socializing. This is something that we kind of have a hard time with in the West, but really, 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 we should be doing this lunar work completely solitary. But if we are with a group of people, which is fine, we want to be alone together. And also another way that you can do group work during the balsamic moon in Virgo is that you can go do social work together. This is also a fantastic moon for getting housework done, but housework as a spiritual practice. Very, very important. Repetitive work is really great for this, but being able to bring that level of attention and presence with what you're doing, it doesn't mean doting on every single thing, but it means having a reverence for your space and understanding how when things are right, and that's very subjective, right, for you and your space and your activities. But when things are right in your space, everything kind of falls into place, right? Like the work is wanting to get done. The space is activated and it's ready to hold you while you are getting your work done, whatever your work is. So that's what's up. For our lunar body work, we are resting, nourishing, relaxing, supporting, or otherwise restoring our digestive systems. That's what's up. Side note, Virgo is ruled by the planet Mercury. Of course, once again, Mercury in retrograde in the background. So we really have a lot of support from the universe to retreat, retract, rescind, remove ourselves from the environment and go and do our own thing for a bit. For plant body work, while the moon is in Virgo, do research on your plants. Don't touch them. We're too nitpicky and a little too fussy, especially with this Mercury in retrograde. We're a little too fussy when the moon is in Virgo to mess with our plants, and we will trim them within an inch of their lives, or we'll mess with the soil too much, or we're just too nitpicky. So do some research. It's a great day for that, but don't touch the plants. Okay. The other thing that we have happening on this day is we have Mercury retrograde in Libra, trine Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius at 22 degrees. So this could be a fantastic day for future tripping. Again, we're reviewing, we're reconsidering, we're renegotiating, we're reevaluating things. We already have another lunar moment earlier in the week that's like, hey, let me reconsider my long-term plans and my long-term career goals, and let me take a look at all of that stuff. And here, this Mercury trine Jupiter is also supporting this work a lot. Other things that could happen, though, with this transit is that a piece of information might come up from the past that presents an opportunity that you didn't notice before, or that might not have even existed before, but now changes the situation. Again, while Mercury's in retrograde, we don't necessarily want to commit to something for the next 3 years, right? But this new piece of information might be like, oh, wow, okay, now I really have to reevaluate because this legitimately changes the situation. Let me think about this for a second. Okay. Also on this day, we have the heliacal rising of two fixed stars, Guiana and Porrima. Now, the Guiana is one of the Berhenian fixed stars. There's a small collection of, I think, 15 fixed stars that are really, really super important for people that work with fixed stars and magicians who do star magic and stuff like that. But I don't really have a lot of information about that star. There's just not a lot of information out there about that fixed star. However, Porrima, there is a lot of information. So let's get into that. Porrima derives from ancient Rome. Porrima, also known as Antevorta, was one of the Kamene, or goddesses of prophecy. Porrima through Porsa all refer to two early goddesses of prediction, much favored by the Romans, which must alone account for them taking any note of this star at all, because it's not very big. The Latins called this star Porrima or Antevorta, sometimes Postvorta, and these are the names of two ancient goddesses of prophecy. They were sisters and they were assistants of Carmenta or Carmentis. They were worshipped and at times invoked by Roman women or Latin women. The Camine were 3 or sometimes 4 in number. The Carmentis or Carmenta, the leader of the Carmine, but then you also have Antevorta, Postvorta, and Egeria. Her name was derived from the Latin carere and mens, words meaning devoid of and reason, referring to the state of prophetic frenzy in which she was out of her mind. So we have Antevorta and Postvorta, who were probably at first two aspects of Carmenta, but who in time became important enough on their own to be considered actual separate goddesses, though they were still generally believed to all be sisters or attendants to Carmenta. Their names refer to their prophetic powers that come into play at the birth of a child. Both come from the root verter, meaning to change, to turn, to alter. So Antevorta then means before change, and Postvorta means after change. Bitch, come on. What? This is one of those things, again, that I read it, and I was like, there's so much here. So we know we already have a ton about prophecy going on. We've already had that in the last few weeks. We're going to have more the closer we get to Samhain. There's a lot of divination work that we're doing during Mabon season because we want to know whether the harvest was good enough and it's going to get us through winter. We want to know if there's hardships coming up that we need to be preparing for while we still have a chance to prepare for them, right? But then we also have, well, what I also thought, there's so much here. There's so much. Okay, so we have 3 or 4, right? Just like the archangels. Are there 3? Are there 4? That's very interesting. I love that we have a before and an after. This really makes me think about Nephthys and Isis as the gates of life and gates of death that we talked about last week or the week before. I mean, there's just so much here. It's so good. And then of course that these are all deities that are being worked with around the birth of a child. And again, so much birthing imagery at this time of year with Mary, Sophia, the Virgo. I mean, on and on and on and on and on, right? The mother goddess is giving birth to this massive, massive harvest across the planet, or at least across the northern hemisphere. So here we have this fixed star that is one of four deities that were about prophesying around the time of birth. Oh, it's so good. It's just one of those ones where you're like, come on, really? That's so good. Okay, now let's get into the holy days of October 3rd. Okay, October 3rd kicks off, well, I should say this. In the fall season, at some point, we see the Mara or Mara Wu women's ceremonials. These are the women's healing festivals and fertility festivals that the Hopi celebrate throughout fall. There's a complex of 3 different festivals that take place. They're all multi-day festivals, and they are in fall at some point. We've talked about Native American practices around their holy days in other episodes, but let me just briefly touch on that again. We out here in the world don't necessarily have a lot of information about exactly when a lot of Native American festivals are taking place, and there's a few different reasons for that. One, most importantly, diaspora. These people have been persecuted to the ends of the earth, and so they themselves have lost a lot of their history and a lot of their tradition. So for a lot of Native Americans, they also are approximating the time of year that they think that the festival is supposed to happen. Also, a lot of folks are doing this in alignment with a fixed star rising at a certain time, or the full moon, or the new moon. And so the dates are going to change from year to year, which is something we talk about with lots of different holidays throughout the year on the podcast and in these classes. And also, a lot of Native American tribes that still practice their old traditions have been forced to move, or choose, whatever, to move their holidays to the weekend or so that is closest to when this holiday would normally be celebrated or traditionally be celebrated. And that's because modern life does not allow a lot of people to take off in the middle of the week, or at some bizarre time. But, lots of people have the weekends off. If you're in school, lots of jobs give you the weekends off. And so a lot of tribes will move their festivals to the weekends just to make sure that the biggest number of people can actually attend. So there's that. So at some point here in the fall season, we have this complex of holidays, and they are all around women's healing and fertility cycles. This Hopi ceremonial cycle ends with the 3 women's ceremonies celebrating maturity and fruition, and sets the stage to begin again with germination, because this is also considered the end of the Hopi year at this time of year. So these ceremonials consecrate the harvest season, and initiated adult women will participate in the fall ceremonials in the kivas and with public dances as well. So a lot of this is private, a little bit of it is public for people to attend and watch and enjoy. But yeah, that's going on there for the Hopi. Also on this day, from our Eastern Orthodox friends, we have the Feast of St. Dionysus, who is, come on, it's Dionysus, the god, the grape god, the god of wine and harvest, right here in the midst of the wine and the harvest, right after the day where we have Vindemiatrix, the grape gatherer, fixed star. I mean, come on. Read about the story of St. Dionysus. He's literally fancy for the sake of being fancy. He converted, and everybody was excited about that, and that's the whole gig. There's really not a lot going on with this character's story. And I think this was very much a Dionysus, never heard of him. Just some boring guy in a robe. That's all. Move on, pagans. All right, let's move to October 4th. All right, October 4th, we still have our balsamic moon hanging out in Virgo, so we are still wanting to be retreating, retiring, resting, restoring, as much as is realistically possible for our lives, right? We got to be real with ourselves on that stuff, but also creating this boundary, creating this space for yourself is a profound act of self-care and self-love. Even if it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever amount of time you could squeeze in, just telling the world, telling your loved ones, telling your kids, your students, your clients, your people, your partner, I love you. Please go the fuck away. Okay? It's time to leave me alone for just a moment. Thank you. I have nothing else to say about the moon, and I have nothing else to say about the astrology because there's nothing else going on this day. So let's just get right into the holy days of October 4th. On this day, we have from our Yoruba land friends the feast of Orun Mila. This Orisha oversees wisdom and knowledge and divination. So again, we are right in the pocket here. This source of knowledge is believed to have a keen understanding of the human form and of purity, and is therefore praised as often being more effective than other remedies. Interesting approach there. But yes, absolutely an Orisha overseeing divination, prophecy, things along those lines. Also on this day, we have the feast of St. Francis of Assisi from our Catholic friends. St. Francis has a really interesting story. This is another deity or character, historical figure, archetype that I would encourage going and reading their story just because there's a lot of interesting little details to them, more so than I actually want to get into in the scope of this podcast. There's a great Wikipedia page on them, but the thing that they were probably the most well known for was being a healer and being very kind to people, and especially being very kind to animals and a protector of animals. And so, interestingly enough, on this day, we have the global holiday of the World Day for Animals. And so, again, a fantastic day for giving some love to your animal friends. Virgo is a sign, oddly enough, that is actually dedicated to animal health, animal maintenance, dealing with your pets, spending time with your pets, spending time with animals as opposed to spending time with humans. Another way to do solo work, right? So yeah, very cool to have all of these guys all on the same day. And that brings us to October 5th. October 5th and our balsamic moon enters the sign of Libra, which is where we're going to have our new moon here in just a day or two, right? When we have this balsamic moon in Libra, this is a fantastic time for some self-love. We might also hook up with our lovers and potential lovers and have some sexy time with other people. But again, we're in the balsamic moon phase, so I really recommend self-love. Some self-induced romance, self-induced sexuality, sensuality, playtime with yourself, for yourself, from yourself, to yourself. Absolutely. Give yourself good food, some beautiful things to look at, beautiful things to smell, beautiful things to touch, and absolutely come into a sensual, loving harmony with your own body and your own energy. Woo, we love it. Okay. When we are working with this balsamic moon in Libra for our lunar body, we are resting, relaxing, supporting, nourishing, or otherwise restoring our hips, our kidneys, and our bladder. Our kidneys and our bladder, of course, are helping us eliminate waste and filter out toxins. Filtering out toxins is a nice metaphor for our Mercury retrograde right now, but I love that hips idea, right? So like we want to be coming into the energy of our hips, and what beautiful things that we might find there. Okay. And also for our plant body work, this is another sign where we don't really want to do too much to the plants, but we can fuss with their aesthetics. This might be a nice day to wipe down the leaves of your plants if they're dusty, or wipe down the pots or the stands that your plants are on, or maybe you've got a bunch of plants outside and this might be a cute day to like move them slightly and hose down or sweep down the area where they're normally kept and then put them all back in a new configuration. We don't want to plant, we don't want to harvest, we don't want to graft or transplant, we don't want to prune, we don't want to do any of that kind of stuff. But aesthetics absolutely can get a little bit of focus. And for our holy days, because we really have very little to talk about here, just going to do it all in one, just like the last day, October 4th, October 5th through 14th, we have from our Roman ancestors, the Ludi Fatales. Now, anytime we're talking about the Ludi, Ludi, these are games, and they were usually state-sponsored games, or they were games that were sponsored by rich families, but at the encouragement of the state. We see a lot of that here in America today. Pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of information about this particular set of ludis. They were dedicated to the fates. It's pretty much all I know. But given that we have all of this other fate and prophecy and divinatory stuff happening this week, very interesting that the ludis for the Ludi Fatalis also start in this week. Very interesting. And also on this day, October 5th, we have the day of the Holy Spirit of Sophia from the Byzantine Church. We talked a lot about the Holy Spirit of Sophia in last week's episode, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, basically all throughout the Virgo season. We talked about Sophia over and over and over again. Really incredible concept, archetype, and deity that is basically a bridge between humanity and spirit. And we've already heard that description from one of the Yoruba deities that we are working with this week as well. So it's also very hermetic, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the week. So here is our roundup for this lunar week number, 32? Is that where we're at? I think so. Okay. Our lunar phases are moving from waning half into balsamic, from Cancer to Libra. So Cancer and Libra are both cardinal signs. So this whole week, as much as we've got this Mercury retrograde that's like, we need to review things, and it's the waning moon, which is kind of shutting stuff down, Cancer and Libra both are here trying to help us initiate fall and initiate the new season and get ready for that. And I think it's okay to go backwards as a form of going forwards. I know that doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense, but sometimes we need to review and reorganize and reorient as the beginning of the new process, rather than just let me dive into the new process and not really think about what came before that. So I love this, actually. Our astrology for this week, we have Venus in Scorpio, trine Pluto retrograde in Pisces at 21 degrees on Wednesday, the 29th. Same day, we have the Sun in Libra, trine Saturn retrograde in Aquarius at 6 degrees. On the 30th, we have Venus in Scorpio, square Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius at 22 degrees. On October 1st, we have Mars in Libra oppose Chiron retrograde in Aries at 10 degrees. We have Mercury retrograde in Libra, square Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 24 degrees. And on Saturday the 2nd, we have Venus in Scorpio, sextile Pluto in Capricorn at 24 degrees. Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 24 degrees. And on the 3rd, we have the Sun in Libra oppose Chiron retrograde in Aries at 10 degrees. We have Mercury retrograde in Libra, trine Jupiter retrograde in Aquarius at 22 degrees. And then that's it. That's it for our astrology. So next week, we have our new moon in Libra. We have Venus entering Sagittarius and Saturn who has been retrograde since May, will be stationing direct. I'm sure it'll be fine. Everybody calm down. For more information about these classes that I've been talking about, this podcast, the other work that I do, please join my newsletter or subscribe to my Patreon if you would like to support this work. Our next class for the Wheel of the Year will be at some point in October, and it will be about Samhain. So the actual fucking spooky time is officially upon us, and I couldn't be happier about it. All right, my heathens, go out there and cause some mayhem. Lovingly, of course, right? Tell them it's for their own good, and tell them your witch sent you. All right, my heathens. Mwah. Blessed be.